Insights from Marcus Aurelius's Meditation into the Inner Fog. In the silence between one battle and another, when the world seemed about to collapse on his shoulders, Marcus Aurelius sat down to write. It wasn't for the people, it wasn't for it was for himself, to urgently remember who he needed to continue to be, even when everything around him pushed in the opposite direction. He, the most powerful man of his time, carried in his soul the same questions as one trying to remain whole in a world that demands math. Every word written was not a lesson, it was a reminder, an emotional mirror, a note left by someone who knew how much the soul can get lost even when the body remains strong. Meditations was not written to teach, it was written to survive, to remember that it's not about conquering the world, but about not surrendering to it internally. When everything fails, when everyone screams, when emotions become a storm, there is a space within us that can still be protected, a space where lucidity breathes, a space where dignity dwells. Seneca said that true greatness is to remain calm in the storm. Marcus Aurelius lived this, not as an invincible hero, but as a fragile human being who chose every day not to abandon himself. And perhaps that's why Epictetus, a former slave, was his greatest teacher. Because only those who have nothing know the value of keeping everything that matters, their own conscience at peace. The promise of this text is not answered. They are fragments of lucidity for days when the soul feels heavy. Small sparks of courage to remember that even when tired, even when wounded, you can still choose your own presence. You can still decide how to go through pain without losing yourself. The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thought. The mind is like a house where we live without realizing, and sometimes, even in silence, it fills with voices that are not our own, voices that judge, that demand, that hurt, old repeated voices that settled in as truths but were never truly ours. Marcus Aurelius knew this. He wrote to clean those walls, to filter what entered, to remember that happiness is not a random emotion. It is an internal construction made with what we choose to think. There's a silent wound that almost no one sees, that of living hostage to one's own thought, that weariness of treating oneself as an enemy, of constantly comparing oneself, of believing every cruel narrative that passes through one's head. The mind becomes a prison when we forget we hold the key. And Marcus Aurelius gives us this reminder. It's not the world that destroys you. It's what you choose to think about it. And thinking is a choice, even if difficult, even if painful, even if it seems impossible on certain days. But it is a choice. When you wake up, when something happens, when someone hurts you, there's a second of pause. And in that second, you can decide what to feed. Anger or lucidity, judgment or compassion, the repetition of fear or the construction of presence. A simple yet profound practice. Before sleeping, jot down a thought that dominated your day. Read it carefully, feel what it provoked, and then honestly ask yourself, does this thought deserve to be with me tomorrow, or does it need to be left here today so I can breathe again? What we think, we feel. What we feel, we live. And what we live, repeat until we choose differently. Life begins to change when we change what we allow to dwell within us. Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. There's an emotional trap that catches us off guard, believing, without realizing it, that everything said about us is true. A criticism, a comment, a sideways glance, and that's it. The heart begins to build certainties on others' doubt, as if every opinion were a mirror, but it's not. It's just a distorted reflection, painted by the history of the observer, and yet we let ourselves be molded silently. Marcus Aurelius invites us to be suspicious, not of others, but of the haste to take their words as absolute. Because what we hear most of the time isn't about us. It's about their fear, their judgment, their limitation. Still, we let it in as if it were truth, as if it defined us, as if our identity could fit into the ill-conceived phrase of someone who doesn't even know us from within. It's easy to get lost this way, molding gestures to avoid judgment, adapting silences not to inconvenience, smiling when you want to scream. But there's a price. Little by little, we stop being who we are to fit into the expectations of those who don't even truly know who we are. This is not maturity. It's self-abandonment, and self-abandonment always costs dearly. Stoic philosophy reminds us what others think of you says more about them than about you. And that's not pride, it's lucidity. The lucidity of protecting your essence, your truth, your journey. The lucidity of remembering that not everything that reaches you needs to stay. Not all criticism is constructive. Not every opinion deserves to echo within. So every time you hear something that hurts, pause, breathe, and ask courageously, is this a fact or just the perspective of someone with different eyes than mine? This simple question can save your sanity, because those who live through the eyes of others never learn to see within, and it is from within that freedom begins. You have power over your mind, not over events. Realize this, and you will find strength. There's a type of suffering that doesn't arise from what happens. It arises from how much we want to control what doesn't depend on us, the other person, the weather, the future, path. We cling to the illusion that if we have more control, we will have less pain. But that never happens, because what isn't ours escapes. And when it escapes, it hurts, not out of malice, but out of attachment. Marcus Aurelius understood that true control is not external. It is internal. It is in how we react, interpret, sustain what comes to us. When we try to control events, we live in tension. When we understand that the only real control is in how we choose to respond, a new kind of power is born. A silent yet profound power, a power that doesn't impose itself but sustain. It's difficult to accept because we were taught to make plans, to foresee risk, to avoid failures. We were taught that if something went wrong, it's our fault, and this guilt becomes an unbearable burden. But Marcus Aurelius offers us another path, a path where strength lies in letting go, in accepting what arrives, in not fighting the current, but learning to swim in it with presence. This presence is not passivity. It is courage. Courage to see chaos and still maintain serenity. Courage to hear a no and not crumble. Courage to mourn without getting lost in pain. Because when you realize you have power over your mind, you free yourself from the despair of trying to control the world. Freedom is not getting everything you want. It's not destroying yourself when that doesn't happen. And that strength no one can take from you. It is yours. It is born and grows within. It has always been there, just waiting for you to look inward with more courage than control. The soul becomes what it feeds on. Not everything that enters us is food. Sometimes it's a comment, comparison, a malicious phrase repeated until it becomes a belief. We feed our soul unconsciously with what we hear, watch, feel, repeat, and often without noticing, we begin to live intoxicated by ideas that diminish us. Marcus Aurelius knew this. That's why he wrote to purify thought, to remind himself every day what should nourish his soul and what he needed to stop consuming, because everything around us shapes us. But not everything that shapes us deserves space within us. There are days when the soul feels heavy, without spirit, without direction, and perhaps the problem is not with the world. It lies in what you've been allowing in, the voices you repeat, the distractions you consume, the judgments you accept without question. What you allow yourself to hear every day builds what you feel, and what you feel defines what you become. Therefore, there is a silent practice that changes everything. Consciously choosing what we let in, choosing more carefully what nourishes our thoughts before sleeping, what nourishes our silence upon waking, a phrase, a memory, an image, a value, a simple gesture, small nourishment for a soul that hungers for meaning. The soul becomes what it feeds on. And perhaps this is the most necessary reminder for times when everything wants to distract, when everything wants to steal our presence. The question that remains is, what have you been feeding your soul with, and what has it become because of? Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. There comes a silent moment when we realize that overthinking has become an escape, that overplanning has become paralysis, and that justifying waiting has become a disguised way of not starting. Marcus Aurelius saw this clearly. He wasn't seeking perfection. He was seeking coherence. And coherence is the act of being now what conscience has been whispering for a long time. Being good is not a distant idea. It is an intimate decision. It is refusing the ease of judgment and choosing the weight of responsibility. It is moving from discourse to action, because the truth is simple. We all know what we need to change, but many wait for the ideal moment, the perfect motivation, the certainty that it won't hurt. But that moment doesn't exist. The danger is this: transforming reflection into an excuse, making self-knowledge a state, not a path. Marcus Aurelius wrote for himself because he knew that self-deception was more subtle than any enemy, and by writing, he reminded himself being a good man is not about being admired. It's about sleeping in peace with one's own character. The question then is practical. What would you postpone forever if you didn't force yourself to start today? What does your conscience already know, but your comfort zone continues to pretend not to see? Stoic virtue begins with the step not taken by others, but by you, in the silence of your own choice. Waste no more time arguing. Waste no more time waiting. The soul already knows. Only action is missing, and that act, however small, is already a beginning. The invisible nobility of one who chooses themselves every day. Marcus Aurelius didn't write to be remembered. He wrote not to forget it. His words are not advice for those seeking glory, but anchors for those who, in silence, try not to sink. Each page of the Meditations carries the deep breath of a man who, even as emperor, needed to remember to be human. Seneca said, "Life is not short. It is poorly used." And when you read Marcus Aurelius, you understand that enjoying life is not filling it with pleasure, but with purpose. It is refusing to live on autopilot. It is refusing to let what is essential be suffocated by what is urgent. Epictetus echoes like a firm whisper, "Do not ask that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do happen." And this change in perspective transforms everything, because when we stop demanding control and begin to practice present, a rare type of freedom is born, a silent freedom, internal, unbreakable. The greatest insight of the Meditations is not in beautiful phrases. It is in the continuous effort to try, even when tired, even when failing, even without applause, to get up, to look inward, and to decide to be someone worthy of one's own consciousness. Perhaps being Emperor of Rome was not Marcus Aurelius's greatest achievement. Perhaps the greatest achievement was keeping his soul firm in the midst of a world that tried all the time to tear it from him. And perhaps our greatest achievement is similar, to choose every day who we still want to be, even when no one is looking, even when no one thanks us, even when everything demands the opposite, because there in the deepest silence lies true strength.